Trump and his cadre of killers have lined up with Nazi organizations around the planet. And since he was speaking today, I thought it would be appropriate to share with you something that was in Salon also today, an interview by Chauncey DeVega, an interview of Malcolm Nance. Now, I'm sure you know who Malcolm Nance is. You've seen him on MSNBC many times. He is a former senior chief petty officer in the U.S. Navy. He's an intelligence analyst, a leading expert in counterterrorism studies, and he's the author of several books, including The Plot to Hack America, Defeating ISIS, The Plot to Destroy Democracy, and his new book is titled They Want to Kill Americans, the Militias, Terrorists, and Deranged Ideology of the Trump Insurgency. Now, Malcolm Nance is also a counterterrorism analysis for MSNBC, which is probably where you've seen him. That's where I've seen him for the most part. And he's the founding executive director of the New York-based think tank Terror Asymmetrics Project on Strategy, Tactic, and Radical Ideologies. Asymmetric, sorry. Now, in this conversation that I'm going to share with you pretty much verbatim because I think it's very important, Nance warns that Trump and what Chauncey DeVega calls the Republican fascist movement, which I call the Christian terrorist movement, it constitutes a phenomenon that Malcolm Nance calls Titus, Titus. That stands for Trump insurgency in the U.S. Titus. Trump insurgency in the U.S. And in Malcolm Nance's view, Titus will be the basis of an extended right-wing insurgency. Remember, it's only just begun. And the goal of this is ending multiracial democracy in this country. And the January 6th attack, Malcolm Nance contends, was just one element of a much larger strategy. And in many ways, it's a proof of concept of what these Nazis want to do in this country, and a roadmap for the methods. A roadmap for the methods that Titus and the other anti-democratic forces will use in this sustained attack on America. Now, let's go back to the January 6th committee. To this point, the committee's hearings and related investigations have, without a doubt, established that Donald Trump and his Confederates, including certain Republican members of Congress, were involved in this serious nationwide conspiracy that went from the local level to the federal level, and it was aimed at nullifying the results of the 2020 presidential election and installing Trump as an autocratic ruler. And in doing this, in this coup plot, there were several apparent crimes committed, including seditious conspiracy, voter fraud, financial fraud, witness tampering, obstruction of Congress, and even acts of terrorism. Now, the assault on the Capitol by thousands of this son of a bitch's ardent followers, including right-wing paramilitaries in this country, was a key part of the coup plot. Trump's mob was not random or hapless or unarmed or uncoordinated, and that's exactly what too many observers in the mainstream news media and elsewhere have long insisted. Well, it got out of hand. Look, these bastards were armed, some of them with lethal weapons, including pistols and assault rifles. And the goal was clear. Keep the Orange Vama in power at any cost in defiance of the will of the American people. So, this interview is kind of disturbing, and that's probably the main reason I want to share it with you. I figure, well, what the hell? If I'm going to be disturbed, so are you. Right? Nance is going to share details here in a moment on the events of January 6th, and he speculates on some of the most disturbing questions. He suggests that right-wing paramilitaries like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers would have become Titus stormtroopers had this plot succeeded. The initial stage had succeeded. So the interview begins with Chauncey de Vega saying, "How are you feeling? How are you making sense of this? You literally predicted the Trump insurgency, the events of January 6th, and this worsening democracy crisis." Answer: It does hurt in a way to be a type of Black Cassandra. Apollo cursed her with the gift of foresight, where everything she said would be true and she would never be believed. Apparently, it doesn't matter what I say. It only matters that I document it, say it clearly, and that hopefully the public understands the reality of the situation. This is what I do in the new book. I saw January 6th and this escalating crisis coming a very long way away. On November 6, 2020, I was on Real Time with Bill Maher, and he was preaching kumbaya, like, let's get along and come to an understanding with each other. He said there's enough doom and gloom. And I said, you want doom and gloom? I'll give you doom and gloom. The United States is going to have an insurgency. The Trump voters are going to form an insurgency. Maher caught onto it rather quickly. He said, well, you mean like Iraq or Afghanistan? I said, yes. It is a political paramilitary insurgency where they intend to destabilize the new government until it collapses. Question. The contract for this book, They Want to Kill Americans, was signed on December 16, 2020. And that was 3 weeks before the insurrection. You had already started this book, and I understand that the United States was going into a state of right-wing insurgency from what you've written. The Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the 3% militia were already having meetings and conferences together to plan for an insurrection. Question. Why didn't people listen? Most of the evidence was public. What do you do with the frustration, anger, and other emotions? This was wholly preventable. Answer. There is a measure of frustration, but I'm an intelligence professional. My job is to analyze. We don't predict the future. Intelligence professionals give you a series of options from the most likely, the least likely, all the way out to the worst case scenario. My books are a deep analysis of threats to the fundamental fabric of America. Unfortunately, the news media processes things very late and in some instances refuses to believe the facts and reality of the situation, no matter how dire it is. In the end, I just let my work speak for itself. Question. As a military intelligence professional, what did you see on January 6th? What was your assessment of the situation? Answer. What I saw back in November and December 2020 would manifest itself on January 6, 2021. I was not surprised. In fact, some of the warnings that I was making in real time were being scoffed at, even on January 6 as the events unfolded. For example, when I was on the air with Joy Reid at MSNBC, I was deeply concerned because as the fighting was going on at the Capitol, I was trying to warn the public that the police and other defenders needed to be prepared for what are called murder cells in that Trump crowd. A murder cell is a professional team of people who go in for a very specific purpose in the middle of a crowd to do just that, murder people. They use that swath of humanity as cover, but they are organized, they move together, and then get in to accomplish their mission. The crowd is the camouflage. Question. How close were we to martial law on January 6th? That was what Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, and other parts of Trump's coup cabal were urging him to do. What would have happened? Answer. I believe that we were within hours of a full-scale coup d'etat in the United States on January 6th. The only thing that broke it was the fact that Donald Trump didn't come down to the Capitol. Now we have evidence. Trump was going to declare himself president of the United States. He and his Confederates were waiting for that crowd to neutralize everyone, the key people at the Capitol. Every person in the chain of succession was in that building. That's the vice president. If he got killed or incapacitated, Donald Trump would have had to appoint the vice president. The Speaker of the House was there. The President of the Senate, pro temp, was in that building. If you lose that chain, then you go to the senior member of the cabinet. If that one officer had not shot Ashley Babbitt and that mob of people had broken through those doors and started beating and killing and humiliating members of the House of Representatives, it would have been broadcast around the world. Mobs go savage very quickly. If that scenario had played out, who would have been the only real ultimate authority left in the United States? Donald Trump would have been the only non-incapacitated surviving authority in the United States with no chain of succession. The United States government would have been Donald Trump that night. And if that scenario had played out, Donald Trump would have been the only non-incapacitated surviving authority in the United States. All you have to imagine is if part 2 of the coup plot had been successful and Donald Trump had gone to the Capitol to lead the protest, Trump would have been leading the murder, the abuse, and humiliation of the people at the Capitol. I really do believe that Trump's intent was to go to the Capitol and march down the halls into the well of the House and declare himself king. Question: why won't the mainstream news media types just say this, plain, out loud, this truth? Answer: they see it as being something untoward and unacceptable. They don't want to say such things about Trump and his Confederates and the mob because they have not been indicted for conspiracy. The root of that reluctance is in part how Donald Trump's followers, that mob, got to the Capitol building in the first place. Roughly 40,000 protesters were there for Donald Trump. It's believed that 10,000 or more laid siege to the building and 2,000 entered the Capitol. The news media doesn't want to take on these subjects for the same reason that the Capitol Police and the U.S. Park Police and the Washington, D.C. Police couldn't respond to these people until the last moment. The Trump cultists were camouflaged. How? They were camouflaged with white skin. That camouflage allowed them to engage in hand-to-hand and other close-quarter battle with the police at the Capitol. White skin. Question: what are the capabilities of the Trump insurgency movement? What does the leadership look like? What are its weapons capabilities? How would you describe the threat assessment? Answer: all of these disparate groups, most notably the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, by summer 2020 had merged into what I describe as Titus, Trump insurgency in the U.S. Who's the leader? Donald Trump. Who are the principal officers? His senior people. Who are the shooters on the street? Every Trump voter. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.